Welcome to Unpacking the Athlete podcast, hosted by yours truly, Rob Martin. Welcome to Unpacking the Athlete, a podcast dedicated to diving deep into what makes athletes who they are. Today's guest, a man who knows how to ride a bike and run very, very far. Here are just a few of his career highlights. In 2009, he won the Furnace Creek 508, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. He is a 5-time 24-hour national champion, and he snagged the 1,000K road world record. Our guest today is Chris Ragsdale. Welcome, Chris. I can't wait to learn more about you and your love for the ultra endurance.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Are you ready to rock?
Absolutely, man.
All right, my first question, I asked this to Jim Trout, and I'm going to ask it to you because you guys are you love these ultra events. So if you remember the question, cool. If you don't, here it is, and here are your 3 choices. This is kind of a fun question.
All right.
If you had a choice between these 3 events, which one would you choose? And all these were made up by me, although I think Jim reminded me or told me that one of these might be a real thing. Number 1, the agonizing African 23,000 kilometer race from top to bottom of Africa, or vice versa. Number 2 is the around-the-clock Australian 19.7K, which is once clockwise around and then turning around and going counterclockwise back around. Number 3 is the Great Greenland 500-mile run stretching from the western shoreline to the eastern shoreline.
Oh, man. I think I'm going to go with the Greenland one. I just feel like it might be less time out there. And as strange as it is, I know I'm an endurance guy. I really don't like events past, say, a week. And some of those ones were looking pretty long. So, I'm going to pick the Greenland race.
Jim picked that one as well. It's
Did
kind of
he
funny.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? And did you play any sports as a kid?
I grew up in Grand Haven, Michigan, actually, and I grew up just doing track and football primarily. I did have to wrestle for one season, but it was not my thing. I was, mostly into track and football throughout school.
Okay. And then where did you attend school? High school? Elementary?
Yeah, so that was at Grand Haven High. Yeah.
Okay. What positions did you play in football?
Yeah, it was fullback and linebacker.
So you played both sides of the ball.
Yeah. And I didn't play
wrestle? Go ahead.
Junior, senior year. That was mainly early on in junior high, and I think I played up till 10th grade football.
Okay. And then wrestling, did you do that in high school too?
I just did one season. I think it was freshman year maybe. I got into a fight during a game at the end of the football season, and the rules stated that I needed to sit out a quarter of the next season that I did. And so my track coaches came to me and they're like, "You're not going to miss a quarter of the track season. And you either need to make the basketball team or you need to join wrestling." And there was no chance of me making the basketball team. So I had to join wrestling. And so I wrestled with the team and sat out the first quarter of the season or whatever it was, and then ended up quitting. But, the wrestling coach was pissed because he thought he saw some natural talent there, and he was bummed I didn't want to stick it out. And really, I was just there to sit out my season.
Get that over with so you could be track.
Yeah.
Did you do track all 4 years?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And then did you go on to college?
I did some college at Muskegon Community College, and I did some stuff at the Career Line Tech Center, like my junior and senior year through high school. And then ended up getting jobs in the print industry, which is what I was going to the Career Line Tech and MCC for. And then, ended up quitting school and just working. Pretty shortly, it was like a year and a half after high school, I moved out here to Seattle, which is where I still am now.
Oh, okay. So you made the move a while ago then.
Yeah, yeah, that was like 96. I moved out here to Seattle.
Oh, okay. I was a little, I guess I was under the impression that it was more like mid 2000 or mid 2010s when you went out there, but mid 1990s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was
Okay.
kind of interesting that I ended up starting to go back for all those races and do all that stuff in Michigan, but it was all long after I had moved away. And I found all those races kind of, via friends or family back home. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm going to start with 2002, and you discovered the love for the bike. Did you ever ride before that?
I didn't. I mean, I had like a BMX bike as a kid, and that was about it. I mean, it was mainly just a transportation thing to get me to my friend's house growing up. It wasn't until, much later, it was actually post 9/11 when I sort of realized life's short and who knows what's coming around the corner. I better knock some things off my bucket list. And I basically quit my job and rode my bike coast to coast, just touring, right? Just pulling a trailer with a tent, did some bike packing across the South, and fell in love with cycling at that point. It quickly grew after that.
Heck yeah. And that was in 2002 when you did that, right?
Yeah, yep.
And what bike did you ride? Do you remember what bike you had?
I do. It was a Navarro Safari from REI. It was sort of a mountain bike rigid frame with some wider 26 tires on there. I pulled a trailer behind me and had a soft ride stem on there. Yeah, it got the job done. I've actually still got the frame in the basement.
Oh, that's awesome. Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about that 2002 adventure that allowed you to connect with the bike?
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing, really. I started off with another guy in Los Angeles that we had met on the Adventure Cycling Association, and we both had a similar goal of riding across the South, and our timing was similar. So we decided to hook up. We started off together, and by like day two, we realized that it was really, really hot. He decided he wanted to ride at night. I wanted to ride during the day to see the things. And so we quickly split up, but we would meet in different cities during the day and things. And so it kind of gave us somebody to connect with and somebody to sort of share the experience with, but still be independent and have our own experiences. There was a ton of really cool stories and stuff. I could spend hours just talking about that coast to coast trip. Basically, I found that I really loved riding a bike, and I loved the sights and the smells, and being able to pass over so much ground on a given day. And it was a really cool experience by the end of it. I really knew that I wanted to continue riding.
Where was, if you can think, where was like your favorite place during that whole bike trip?
Going through, I've got great memories of like the White Sands National Monument in New Mexico, and climbing the hills north of there. That was just some fantastic riding. Outside of that, I had some great experiences the very, very early days going through Joshua Tree and going through some of the orange groves in Western California. Some of that stuff was just amazing. Yeah, I would say those were my favorites.
All right. I'm going to shift gears a little bit,
Yeah.
and we're going to go to recently. I want to talk about this 200-mile run you did over the New Year's holiday that you and your son did together, and maybe talk
Yeah.
about how amazing that experience was, because most people's kids don't want anything to do with their parents.
Yeah. Yeah. It was super cool. The event was great. It's called Across the Years, and it's a 6 day race that you can do the entire 6 day, or you can sign up for 3 day, which is 72 hours, which is the event we entered. You could do 48 hours, 24 hours, 12 hours. You could also just do a marathon, which starts every morning. We had decided to do the 72-hour race and start on the second day so that we could hopefully finish around midnight New Year's Day, right? We thought that that would be sort of cool. And we sort of knew our pace and timing strategy. So that was what we signed up for. And it went incredibly smooth. My son had a little bit of an issue with his ankle late in the run, maybe 175 miles in, where it started to hurt. But we dealt with that. We ended a couple hours later than we had hoped to, but it's just a super fun event. I mean, there's over 300 people on the course at the same time that we were, and you're on a 1 mile loop. Literally,
Oh,
it's just 1 mile over and over and over again, which has got tons of pros and cons for some. Some people would think of that as like misery for running, but we love it because you can take all the thinking out of it, right? We knew, okay, we would run to that corner, and then at that corner we would walk down to the second stoplight, and then we would start running again, and we could just get it dialed in, and we knew exactly where our lap times would be. And every single lap you can go through the food court, which is this huge double tent where you can go in one side of it and out the other, and they've got a constantly rotating spread of great food for runners. Yeah, it's fun. Every morning there's a whole new fresh group of faces that's popping out there running marathons fast, and people going for 100-mile records and that kind of stuff. So, you get to
Wow.
kind of see all that going on around you, as well as there was a 90-year-old guy in the 6-day race, just out there plodding along, barely shuffling. And it's super inspiring to see just the diversity of the athletes out there, and everybody's got their own goal. Everybody's on their own mission. And super happy that Caden was able to pull that off. I believe he's the youngest person to ever run 200 miles. He kind of had his heart set on that for the last couple of years. He started doing ultras at 10, and he did his first 100-miler at 13, and he's done a couple of hundreds now. And it was kind of that 200-mile distance that really inspired him early on. I was an aid station captain on 200-mile runs. So we would go out and set up these big elaborate camping setups and see all these runners coming through. So he's very familiar with what that looks like, and sort of the struggle that goes on through those types of events. So it was cool that he finally was able to pull that off.
That's really cool. I didn't realize first that it was just a mile loop, and that's cool that he may be the youngest to complete a 200-mile run, especially with the
Yeah.
ankle. So did you guys, I know you probably have like support somewhere. Did you guys get an ankle taped up, or what did you guys do for the ankle to push through?
Yeah, so I think that the ankle problem was caused by a pair of tight socks that he put on, where the elastic band was just too tight, and it started pulling on that lower leg muscle, and just started to cause some swelling and some issues. So pretty quickly after he changed into those socks, he started to feel that ankle problem, and I realized that it might have been from that. So we got him out of those socks and gave him some ibuprofen, and I've got some icy hot with lidocaine we got on there, and started walking another lap. And before long, he was able to warm up and get that thing feeling okay, and we were able to push on. So
That's
yeah, I'm
good.
glad we caught it early, because it could have been debilitating. Some of those issues, if you can't address it super fast, can create a problem.
Absolutely, 100%. Just as an example, I've been running a little bit, 3 to 10 miles here and there, and out of the blue, just for no reason, I think it was like a 6-mile run, and on my way back, when I was a mile from home, one of my calves, I don't remember which one, just all of a sudden I felt pain on one step, the next step a little more, and I thought I'm going to get through it, and the next one, nope. I tried to shake it out. There was no more running. All I could do was walk. So I don't, that was
Yeah, it's rough.
very interesting.
Yeah, geez.
Another question on this, you called it race across the years. Is that what it is?
Across the years, yeah, ATY.
Okay,
Yep.
across the years. The 6-day, is that different from the 72-mile in distance, or is it the same distance, you just get more time to cover the distance?
All the events there are, well, that's not true. Most of them are timed events, right? And so the goal is just how far can you go during that amount of time.
Okay.
So 6-day people are, some of those people are trying to cover 100 miles or 200 miles in 6 days. The winners are more like 500 plus in 6 days. We just happened to have this goal of trying to hit the 200-mile mark, and we knew it was unrealistic for us to really get that in under 48 hours. We had done the previous year, we did the 24-hour race and wanted to get 100 miles in under 24 hours. That's kind of like a good landmark. And Caden did that. He did it in like 22 and a half hours for the 100. But we knew 48 hours was probably not going to cut it for 200. So we had to sign up for the 72-hour race. So that was just our personal goal. Yeah.
Yep.
I think the winner of the 72-hour was at like 218 miles. But Caden finished top 10, I think. I think he was, and he stopped at 200 miles with like 6 hours on the clock still. So
Nice.
He could have done a lot further, but he was just there to hit the 200, which was great.
Yeah. So, how did Caden decide to start doing these? Was it because of you? Was it because he likes it himself a whole bunch? What do you think's going on there?
He's been exposed to ultra his whole life. I mean, as a baby, he was at my national 24-hour races back in Michigan, and he's just sort of been around it. I've constantly had crew meetings at the house, and I've been doing 5 or 6 ultras a year for the last 15 years for his entire life. So it's just always been something he's been exposed to. By the time he was 8, he was helping me run aid stations and stuff for 200-mile foot races. And it was actually right after I came back. I had done the Moab 240, and I had just come home. And it was that day. He was 9 years old at the time, and he said, "Dad, I think I want to run an ultra." And I'm like, "Well, you don't just run an ultra, it's sort of a lifestyle." I said, you put in all the training, you do the time, you sign up for something, and then, you hope things go well and you get to finish the ultra. And he's like, "Well, let's do it." And so he started going with me to group runs and stuff at 9 years old. And he was able to hang on these like super fast trail runs with adults in the dark at night in rainy Seattle weather. It just progressed from there. We signed up for a half marathon, we signed up for a marathon. And then at the age of 10, he finished a really challenging 50K in the mountains, with lots of climbing. And he finished middle of the pack. It wasn't like he was near the back or fighting to make cutoffs or anything. He was midfield at 10 years old. So we just kept building on it. It's entirely driven by him. I let him pick the goal. I let him pick the race. And if anything, I'm a little negligent on making sure he's doing enough training. I sort of touch base with him. I'm like, "Do you still feel good about this? Are you doing everything you need to do? And, what's your plan?" But I really let him drive his training and drive his goal setting and that kind of stuff. So when he comes to me with this kind of stuff, it's kind of fun to just see what his ideas about it are and to see what he thinks possible for himself.
That's really epic, I think. I've told other people, but you like kind of won your own little kid lotto there.
It's pretty fun to be able to share that stuff with him. I mean, when we go out on those adventures, you go through a lot of highs and lows as an athlete. You feel great, and then you feel down, and then you bonk, and then you work through it. And so to be able to go through that with your son and sort of just help him navigate what he's experiencing. And obviously, I think he's got a lot of trust in me that whatever he goes through, he knows I'm going to be able to sort of help him work through it. And I think that that's the part that makes it seem so possible for him, is just that whatever comes up, he knows that we don't have to quit. There's just some tools in our toolbox that we need to access in order to help us get through this thing. And sometimes it's just sitting down and resting or walking or doing whatever we got to do. But, we can most likely keep going and finish it.
Heck yeah. Yeah, that's really cool, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch and talk about RAM, which is Race Across America, which for those who don't know, maybe go check out Jim Trout's episode because we get a little more into it there and you can learn a little more about what it is. But basically, on your bike from the West Coast to the East Coast.
Yeah.
It's across America. So my first
Yep.
question to you is, what was your best moment of RAM in 2013?
I had an incredible day in Missouri, and for no particular reason, we were on some rolling terrain in the hills of Missouri, and for the first time, I felt like things had really clicked. I kind of had some off stuff early on. It was super hot, and I was cramping, and then we had saddle issues. We had all this stuff go on. We had these terrible knee problems, but I hit this stretch in Missouri where all of a sudden I just started attacking, like I was racing again. And I felt like myself, and I really had confidence that we were gonna make the finish line, and it felt magical for I don't know, I want to say 5, 6, 7 hours. I don't know what it was, and then you're back into the lulls. But that's the thing that's coming to mind right now, is this wonderful stretch we had where I really felt like myself, and
Yeah.
was able to sort of put all the pain and agony of the process aside.
That's funny. You talk about a magical 7 hours on the bike. And when I think of 7 hours on the bike, that's a long ride for me. And I'm like, I go through these ups and downs through that 7 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing about Ram is it's so much. I mean, there's so many ups and downs, and it was a lot. It's funny. Jim Trout that you interviewed is a good friend of mine, and I've got a lot of other friends who've done Ram, and I prior to Ram had ruled it out. I had said that I would never do Ram. I was pretty dead set on that. I had some bad experiences going more than 2 days before. I had done this thing called Boston, Montreal, Boston, and got really sleep deprived when I was like, around hour 50 or something like that, and told myself that I would never do Ram. I then had sort of the flip flop experience where I had this incredible ride in Paris where I did Paris, Brest, Paris. And that one really sort of changed my mind and made me believe that Ram was possible for myself and that there was the chance that I wouldn't have those terrible sleep deprivation issues. I decided to do Ram after all of my years saying that I wouldn't. It was rough. I know Jim talks about it like it's the most magical event out there. I have a lot of feelings about that one. Honestly, I tell these people I still get contacted by new people who want to do the race and who are training, and there's not that many guys out there who've done it, so they come to me asking for advice and suggestions and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, look, I can help you do this if this is like really what you need to do. I'm like, if you've got other bucket list items out there, some other checklists that you think you could check off, I would say go there first. If this is the very last thing you need to do, then I'll help you do it. But I wouldn't recommend it to my enemies, man. I had some really rough patches out there. And to be frank, I ended up with like PTSD after the event. The sleep deprivation was so bad that I couldn't sleep for more than an hour for weeks and weeks on end. And I would wake up in nightmares and sweats and over and over and over again. And weeks later, it was still like I couldn't sleep for, barely at all. It got to the point where I needed to talk to somebody and deal with those problems. Eventually it went away. It took like 6 or 7 weeks of me barely being able to sleep until that sort of wore off. And that was a really rough patch. And even beyond that aspect of it, in a lot of ways, I sort of have this remorse that like sort of Ram took away the sport that I loved and the thing that I was good at. Prior to that, I had done a lot of shorter 24-hour, 48-hour races and was competitive and had, won a lot of things. And I felt so fortunate that I had found something that I loved and that I was good at. And then after Ram, I was like, I don't want to spend another night on the bike. Like
Yeah.
I just didn't want to ever have to ride through the night again. And so I shifted gears. I'm like, I don't want to just throw away all this fitness and the adventure and that aspect of my life. So I moved into other things. Anyway, that's my brief touch on Ram, I guess.
That's you touched on my second question, so I don't need to ask it. That's wow, the sleep thing, that's crazy. And I'm glad you got through it.
Yeah, I mean, it was rough. I went like 40 hours before we took our first break, and then it was like 90 minutes. And then we were basically on for 22 hours a day and off for 2 hours for another week beyond that.
Ugh.
It's too much. It's too much, man.
Yeah. It's too
I mean, I'm
much,
glad I
period.
got it
Yeah.
done, right? I mean, I've got friends and I know people who go and, you get super far and then you DNF and then it's this thing that's on your shoulder for the rest of your life and you want to go back and you got to sort of clear yourself of that. So I'm super glad I was able to at least finish and get it done.
Yeah, that is good. You have a good point there. There's that you don't finish, then it hangs back here, and you think about it and what could I have done and what can I do to attain that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So during RAM, most people I think have more than one bike. Is that correct?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so you had more than one bike. What was your favorite bike during that race, and how was it kind of set up?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to get sponsors. I had Velagi actually as my bike sponsor. They were a super new company at the time. Robert Choi had branched off a Specialized and started this endurance road bike company. They were sort of the first one out with disc brakes on a road bike. And I was super grateful they were able to hook me up with multiple bikes, in which I had one set up with more of a climbing setup, and I had another one set up with an aero setup. And I had a friend, Han. We had this super brilliant aero bar setup where we could basically, with a quick release skewer, open the quick release and move my aero bars forward, fore and aft, like up to like 4 inches. So I had all this adjustability, and then I had different setups where I could just undo the quick release, take that setup off, and pop another one on like in 10 seconds that had less or more stack. So if I started having neck issues and other problems, we could just super quickly change that setup.
Okay.
So yeah, it was basically those two bikes and multiple sets of wheels was our bike setup for Ram.
Nice. Have you ever raced mountain bike?
You know what? That's the only type of bike that I've not raced. I did cyclocross. I've done velodrome, track racing, crit racing, road racing, fat bike racing, endurance racing, but I've never raced a mountain bike. I don't know.
Why is that?
I don't know. What's funny is it's probably my weakest link in the bike thing. I just don't have the confidence to like bomb down hills without just holding the brakes. I don't know what it is. I was okay on the cyclocross stuff because it's definitely more flats and more technical and more accelerations and that kind of stuff. But just the mountain bike descending, I've got too much hesitancy to really be able to go for it. I mean, just a little bit I've barely done with friends. I'm like, that's not my thing. Not at all. So
Fair enough. That's fair enough. You had mentioned that you were kind of done with the bike, and so you kind of moved to some of these endurance running events. So I have a question about shoes. And what is your current favorite choice brand of shoe, or do you have a few that you like? And maybe
yeah,
the model.
it's all Hoka for me. I prefer the Stinson, which is like their max model for all my long stuff. I do use the Speed Goats for like my group runs and short 5-10 mile runs and that kind of stuff. But the Hoka Stinson is really my ultra shoe for running.
When were you introduced to Hoka?
It was through my group runs. I'm fortunate. We've got a really great running store just a couple miles from the house that lives on the edge of this really big, beautiful park here in the city of Seattle. So they do demo group runs super often, where, Hoka, Salomon, all these different manufacturers are bringing their shoes and we get to demo them, run through the park for an hour in them, really see what works for you. And it was probably through one of those demo nights that I got to try some of the Hokas, and it just feels right. I'm a bigger guy for running, especially. I'm 185 pounds, which is not ideal for a runner's physique, and I feel it. I prefer the max cushion shoes for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because whenever Hoka kind of came in the scene, I had a client that bought me some and like gifted them to me, but when they first started, they were ugly. And I pulled them out of the box and I tried to like hide my like, what the heck are these face? Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I put them on and I haven't gone away from Hoka since. So
Yeah. It feels good to me. I know everybody's got their own preference, and some of these super light, fast guys, they can go with much less cushion, but I don't
yeah.
know. It works for me.
Yeah. Works for me when I stand all day. So
Yeah.
I do like them. At this point in your life, would you rather race yourself or race with a friend or your son, or go on an adventure kind of run with a friend or your son, and why?
Yeah. It's definitely the adventure stuff at this point in my life. Yeah. I feel like I got the racing bug out of me. I raced for years and was able to sort of pick and choose every different race that I really wanted to do. And that was great. But now I love the adventure stuff. I actually have been dabbling in the adventure stuff on the bike as well as the run. And it's definitely my favorite. Yeah. And with the
Yeah.
son is preferable too, super cool to be able to share those moments now. He's 15 and I understand the time is ticking away before he's off and on his own. And hopefully we'll still be able to do events together, but who knows what what the future has in store. So we're sort of soaking up as much of that as we can do now while everything's in line. So
Yeah. Let's shift again. And if you don't mind, we can talk about maybe the bike car incident that set you back, where you
uh,
were, how it happened, and how long it took you to recover from that.
I think it was 2004. I was preparing for my first ultra bike race. I was trying to train for the Furnace Creek 508, and I got hooked up with the Seattle Randoneering crowd. And that's like a self supported long distance cycling team or club here. I had been doing some rides with them, had just done this long 600-kilometer ride, put the bike away in the basement, gone on vacation. I actually proposed to my wife while we were down on the ocean, down on the Oregon coast. I came back from that trip like a couple of days after proposing and did the maintenance on my bike that was needed, went to spin it around the block, and then woke up in the hospital. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't even on a ride. I literally just tuned up the bike and was cruising it around the block. And I was hit by somebody, went over the car into the windshield, ended up breaking my neck, had some bad wounds on my arm that needed a skin graft, ended up getting bad DVTs in both my legs, the deep vein thrombosis in both legs. It was quite an ordeal. I wore a halo for, I want to say it was 10 weeks, and then a hard brace for quite a while, and then a soft brace after that. It was a rough patch there. There's a lot of different processes. There was a lot of different aspects to it. I mean, early on, there was the adaptation to the pain in the legs and the pain in the neck. Being bolted down by the halo ended up meaning that my eyes had to all of a sudden look left and right versus my neck being able to spin as people were talking to me and things. And then the eyes just had this tremendous pain from the muscles working so much more than they had, going left and right and up and down because I couldn't move my neck. And so that was a whole process. And the healing of my arm, we had to pack full of gauze and rip it off daily so that this tissue could build up over weeks and weeks and weeks before it got to the right level that we could actually take a patch off my leg and cover it and get that to heal. And there was a lot of different stages and steps, but fortunately, Laura decided to stick with me, which I imagine was a little bit of just a big question mark for her. It's like, what am I getting into? What did I just sign on for? Right. But after we healed all up from that, I still had the passion to do that ride that I had, set my heart on, was this Furnace Creek 508. And I went on to do that the following year in 2005. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you came back about 6 months afterwards. You started training again, and then I think you got ninth, right?
I did. Yeah, it was ninth my first year at that. That was my very first race ever. Yeah. And it
That's
was super cool because there was a bunch of top guys. Tinker Juarez was there, and Kenny Souza and Michael MD. There was like sort of all these like pros, and it was super cool to get to yak with them, and Tinker telling me stories on the neutral rollout. And it was like, wow, this is crazy. This is awesome. I sort of grew up, idolizing some of those guys. I finished ninth that first year and really fell in love with that race. That race was sort of what drove a lot of my motivation for continuing with the ultra cycling.
Yeah, that's a good comeback story, man, for sure.
Yeah.
And Tinker still races.
I know, the guy's savage, man. I can't even believe it.
It is crazy. Thinking back to when you got started on the bike,
Yeah.
was there like an investment that you made in yourself, or maybe someone else made in you, that was the most helpful along the way to get you to where you were?
I don't know if it was an investment as much as just the sort of idea that life's short and we really do got to follow our dreams. I think taking advantage of every opportunity that we have to do these types of things is so important. So, I think it's an investment psychologically to just say, yes, this is there for me. And I think I might regret if I don't take this thing on, if I don't try this challenge or go after this goal. And so, my wife's been amazing with that since the beginning. She's annually, we sort of talk about what the next year looks like and what's coming up and what are we going to commit to for the future. And it's always about, what are you most excited for? What's going to make you better? And sort of having these big pinnacle goals like that. That's my motivation for training and exercising and doing all these things. I have a hard time just exercising for the sake of exercising. It's almost always focused on some type of big goal or race or event that I've got coming up in the future.
I'm pretty similar in that respect.
Yeah.
When you made the switch from bike to more running stuff, did anyone influence you to make the decision into the running endurance events, or was that just kind of something you fell into?
There was, yeah, definitely influenced by my buddy Jim Ryan. So Jim was a randoneering guy that had also done some ultra bike racing, and he was in the sort of the same scene. But I knew that every fall he had gone and done the Seattle Marathon. I think it was sort of post the Ram trauma that I realized I wanted to do something more than just the ultra cycling through the night again. And so, I was doing the road racing and crit racing and velodrome racing, but I sort of questioned whether or not this thing could go into ultra running. And Jim was doing that. So we started to talk about running together. And we ended up signing up for the Badwater Salton Sea after like I hadn't run at all really. And we're like, let's just go see if we can do it. Because it's a 2-person race where you have to stay with your partner the entire race. It's not a relay.
Oh,
And so we're covering over 100 miles together as a team. And so he and I decided to take that on. We sort of created a plan, built up, picked a marathon, picked a 50 miler, and then we ended up finishing that Badwater Salton Sea together. And we still continue to race together. He crews for me, I crew for him as we need to. So yeah, it works out
nice.
well.
You said Jim Ryan?
Yeah, Jim Ryan.
Is he the Jim Ryan that broke 4 mile in the first time?
Nope, he's not. But he
Okay.
gets that a lot.
Okay. You said his name, and I'm like, wait a second.
Is that the guy?
Is
No.
that the guy?
Yeah. It's funny. He gets that every time we're out running. Are you the same Jim Ryan? No, no, no. Different guy.
He should just go along with it now.
He should just, yeah, exactly. Just start working it.
So speaking of like a like a team race, you had two guys doing those. Can you talk about the race across Oregon in like 2011 and how the logistics worked with 4 different people on the team?
We did a 4-man team there where we would have 2 crew vehicles and 2 racers and a support person in each of those vehicles. And basically, those vehicles would leapfrog one another and get the other rider up the course. And so, it's just playing leapfrog with 2 vehicles, 2 racers per car, and just going as fast as we can to cover the miles. A lot of fun. I love that style of racing because it's just a bunch of buddies and we've got radios in the cars and it's just a party, tons of food and ice and drinks and stuff in there. And you're just kind of looking forward to your turn to be out on the road and you can just hammer it. You can just go so fast because you're going to get the next 3 legs off before you got to ride again. So
Right.
even when the pulls are short, it's fun. I love that.
Yeah, that does sound like fun. We were actually going to do a race this Sunday, 4-man team, and that's why I
Yeah.
asked. I just wondered how that worked but we couldn't. One guy couldn't do it, so we're not doing it. But anyway, I just thought that might be fun, and it sounds fun. So I think one of these days I'm going to get into like a 4-man team type of race. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, I love that format. It's cool.
Why don't you talk about the world record in 2010 and what made you pick that, and how did you prep for that, and what is it?
Yeah, so that came right on the heels of sort of the big goal for me was always that Furnace Creek 508. That was my first race in '05, and it took 4 years, and I finally won that thing in 2009, which was a whole thing and a cool story in itself. But after that, I was left with, what's next and what excites me. I was a part of the Ultra Marathon Cycling Association, which is the governing body at that time, and was reading about it. And I decided to go for it. It looked like something I could potentially do. At that point, I had set the national 24-hour record. I was the first American to break 500 miles in 24 hours. And I was feeling pretty good. I came off one of my strongest rides, winning that Furnace Creek 508. And I'm like, I think it's time. I think I can give this thing a shot. So there was a lot of logistics involved. First I had to pick the course. I decided I wanted to do the open road. Every single week I would spend time at home on the map, checking things out. It needed to be between, I forget the exact parameters, but I think it was between 9 and 19 miles or something like that. And so I was looking for a 10-mile course that was on the open road, that obviously had smooth roads with very little elevation gain. I wanted it to be able to be all right-hand turns so that I never had to cross left across a lane of traffic. I would just go scout stuff out. I would pick some stuff that I thought would work on the map. I'd go out and ride it on the weekend. It turned out now that was some nasty chip seal and it was super slow road. And so I'd go back and, crunch the map a little again, find a new route. Eventually I found a course that was suitable. It was up north of Seattle here in LaConner, Washington. And it was 4 right-hand turns that was all on smooth pavement, relatively flat. It seemed perfect for what I was doing. I had to pay to get it measured. So the same people that do these marathon courses and a lot of that kind of stuff, they would go out. And so he does this official measurement of the exact route. And he had to, create paperwork and documents around exactly how many meters it was down to like 6 decimal points or something like that. And then I had to submit all this work through the Ultramarathon Cycling Association saying when and where. We had to get officials that had to pass the tests to officiate the event. We rented this Airbnb up in LaConner, and I had my crew people all set. We had the officials all set. We had a pace vehicle that could only come up. I forget what the exact spec was. I think it was once an hour, maybe it was twice an hour. They could run up next to me to be able to hand off bottles and stuff like that. We got it all dialed in. My family was all up there. We gave it a go. I was super nervous, It's nothing like having the spotlight on you like that, with all these people involved and everything. It didn't go well. I mean, I ended up with the 1,000K road world record, which by most measures, that seems like it must have gone well. But we had hopes of getting the 12-hour record. We had hopes of getting the 24-hour record, and those didn't happen. I was super strong early on. I was averaging over 25 miles an hour for the first 100, the second 100. And then these winds kicked up in the afternoon and things got really hard. I had a buddy who's like a super whiz on some spreadsheets with calculations and stuff. And we knew where all my lap times exactly needed to be in order to hit the 24-hour and the 12-hour records and stuff. And with the headwinds, I started slipping. My times weren't hitting it. And then I just started getting to super discouraging, I mean, we were on a 10-mile loop. And so I forget what the exact numbers were, 18 and a half minutes or something. I needed to be, I forget, maybe it was 22 minutes. I honestly don't remember what the exact time was, but I would cross the start finish line and he'd be like 22:35. I was like 30 seconds over. I was like, shit. And I would just dig super deep and I would just hammer it and go for it. I'm like, this is going to be the lap. And I'd give it everything I had. And it'd be like 40 seconds over. And it was like over and over and over and over again. I missed the mark and missed the mark and missed the mark. And I would just commit. I would go all in. I'm like, I don't care if I do 2 more laps. I'm doing this one in time. And I didn't do it. And it just broke me mentally, lap after lap after lap. And so we ended up pushing on, and I missed the 12-hour world record. I missed the 24, and then we pushed on, and I ended up getting the 1,000K. Honestly, I forget. I think it was 30 hours and no, it was 29 hours, 15 minutes maybe. I forget. It was, you think I'd know my own world record, but it was as much about the process, and it was such a discouraging event. It was like, it sort of hurt me mentally. I swore to my crew guy, Bob, when I was done, I'm selling my bikes and buying a fishing boat. I was like, I'm out, man. This is stupid. What are we doing? But anyway, that's the story about the 1,000K.
Man, that's challenging and disappointing, but a little bit rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, I've got that now, and it ended up getting broken. There was a guy in Spain that broke the record, I think 2 or 3 years after I got it. So I mean, it's a cool thing to say that I got and I did. And it was a fun process at the time. I love dreaming big like that and going, you know what? I knew it was possible. And so I'm glad I didn't think about it, right? I mean, I'm glad that now I'm not having to wonder if I could have, right? And it's like,
Yeah,
well, that's, we missed some, we got some, and the cards lay where they are.
absolutely. Why do you love these endurance events and what keeps you going in them?
For me, it's just the challenge. It's the big question mark. I got to answer for myself. I don't want to wonder if I coulda. I don't want to someday think that maybe it was possible, but I didn't really try. And so that's the thing for the endurance events for me is, particularly now with the running events, it's a bigger question mark. For me with the ultra cycling, it was less about whether or not I could do it. It was more about could I win it or could I break the record or, could that happen? And, I got to do a lot of that. And then it got to the point where I didn't want to have to do that. It was like, I remember after my sixth national 24 hour, I'd won the 5 in a row and we were in the sixth one and it was the middle of the night. It's like 2 a.m. We're like 19 hours into this stupid thing. And I was tied for first place with this guy. And I just looked at my crew guy, Matt Smith at the time. I'm like, look, man, I don't want to have to do this anymore. It felt like I had to do it. And it became this, why does everybody else get to stop and I don't get to stop? Like this sucks. I'm like, it'd be so much more fun if I could be third or fifth, like those guys get to stop occasionally. And so with the running, I love that the pressure's not there anymore. I'm a mediocre runner at best, and I'm happy with finishing. And we set some goals for ourselves, but we don't have to win. And it's I can't win, frankly. It's just not in my skill set to win these ultra races on foot. It's just not who I am physically. So it's more fun for me now.
Yeah, that's good though. That's how you do things, longevity wise, is making it fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
You did a lot of the Furnace Creek 508 races.
Yeah.
Thinking about all of those, which one was your favorite and why did you keep going back to that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super fun story. So that was from the beginning, the race. It was my fantasy race. At the time, it was the most popular ultra cycling race in the country, maybe even the world. I went that first year. All those pros were there. It was super cool. And I decided I wanted to win that thing. Prior to that, actually, that was '05 and '06. Michael Emdy had won that thing. And I ended up calling him up and asking him, like, hey, what did you do to win this, man? What's your plan? Like, how are you doing this? And he told me, he's like, here's the deal. You right out of the San Francisco Canyon, you got to be the first top 3 out of the canyon. He's like, if you're not in the mix there, you're not going to be in the mix, and he's like, you got to win to the top of Towns Pass. If you don't got what it takes to win at the top of Towns Pass at mile 200, then you just don't have what it takes to win. And so he's like spelling all these things out. He's like, I would just go ridiculously hard from the very beginning. He's like, it's not that I'm not going to bonk. He's like, it's just when I bonk, you're not going to be there to see it. He's like, I'm going to be so far ahead of you that I'm going to be able to put myself back together before you can ever, before you're ever going to catch me. And he just told me the story on how to do it, right? I mean, his plan, and it's not as strategic as most people would think, right? They're like, oh, it's 500 miles, pace yourself. And he's like, no, I'm going out at 30 miles an hour until you can't see me anymore. Long story short, it took me multiple years, and I ended up beating him in 2009 by employing all of his strategy that he had told me. I beat him out of the canyon. I ended up beating him to the top of Towns Pass. Super fun. We ended up the fastest time to Furnace Creek in history. He and I just duking it out. We covered 100 miles of that stretch from, I think it was, I forget the 2 different aid stations. We covered 100 miles, averaging 25 miles an hour with like 11,000 feet a game or something like that. It was ridiculous. We were going so fast. We got into Furnace Creek and we ended up having these wicked, like 60 mile an hour headwinds. He and I are duking it out, going like 5 miles an hour in our very lowest gear, just crawling down the road in the middle of the night in Death Valley with sand blowing across there. And he ends up passing me. I couldn't stay with him at the time. So at Furnace Creek, he's like 3 minutes ahead of me. We get up and out of there. We climb the valley out of Furnace Creek to Shoshone, this time station, and he's like 11 minutes ahead of me. I'm thinking this isn't good, right? I'm like, oh my God. So we ended up pushing on. We get to the very next aid station. I'm down by like 19 minutes. Like, shit, this is only going the wrong way. Right? This is terrible. And so my crew guy, Mark Thomas at the time, had run splits on Michael MD and myself. And he had, used Excel to group different time slots and stuff like that. And he knew that when we got to Baker, that I had finished from Baker to the finish line, like the last 170 miles of the race, faster than MD on every occasion. And so it just so happened that we had gotten dropping down into Furnace Creek super early, and we were able to fill up on gas there. And my crew knew to do that, so that when we got to Baker, this time station, we didn't have to fill up with gas, but we knew that everybody else did. So kind of a crazy story. Mark told me, he's like, you finished from Baker to the finish line faster than MD every single year. Now, you've never beaten him because he's been so far ahead of you that, you couldn't catch him, but you closed ground on him. And so when we got to Baker, I was only down by 20 minutes. And I said, how much time did I make up on MD last year? And he said an hour. And I'm like, oh, I was an hour faster from Baker to the finish line. So we blasted out of there knowing that he had to stop and get gas. I didn't need to get gas. He's only 20 minutes up the road, and I can finish this 170 miles an hour or 170 miles an hour faster than he can. So I shoot out of there like a rocket. I am going so fast. I'm blasting my music, and it's like a 20-mile climb on this desert road that's just totally potholed and like nasty. I end up catching him on that 20 miles, which was unheard of, right? I mean, I was flying up this climb. I figured it was going to take me 50 miles or 70 miles to catch him or something like that, but I catch him in the next 20 miles, and I'm just giddy inside. I'm like, oh, I tell my crew just before we get to him that I want to stop and put on my disc wheel just so he can, it's like this intimidation factor, which he had told me about, right? He's like, oh, I always like passing guy with a disc on so they can hear the swooshing as we go past him. And so I initially stopped just before we caught him. And it was like the most epic battle in the middle of the desert that nobody got to witness. It was Michael and I basically just hammering it and attacking each other over and over and over and passing each other, over and over again for hours during the night. We ended up getting to the final aid station, and he kind of like starts coasting super slow, and he's going like 5 or 6 miles an hour. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And my crew's like, pass him. I'm like, nah, let's just mess with him a little bit. And they're like, what are you talking about? Just go. And I'm like, no, he wants me to go. I don't want to go. And so we're just like going like 6 miles an hour, sort of coasting down this road. And he ends up stopping. Well, it turns out he was having issues. I end up stopping, taking my vest off, changing helmets. We get back on the bike, and my crew's like, go, let's get out of here. I'm like, no, he's not on the bike yet. And they're like, you don't have to wait for him. This is just a race. You were trying to beat him to the finish line. I'm like, well, I want to beat him heads up. I want to beat the guy when he's got his gloves on, So I wait for him. It takes him like, I don't even know, 5 or 10 minutes. And it turns out he's going to the bathroom off in the sagebrush. By the time he gets back on his bike, we get rolling. I punch it up this climb. I gapped him significantly. I end up beating him to the top of that climb by like 20 minutes. We blast down, and I finally win the final 8. And it was like, I was so ecstatic. And he ends up coming in 20, 30, 40 minutes later, and he rolls through and he goes right over into the porta potty. And I'm like, okay, that was probably what was going on, right? He had some issues going on, some intestinal stuff happening. And I felt incredible. We got these finish line pictures taken, me and the crew and me and MD. And well, it turns out 3 months later, he accuses me of cheating. So here's this guy that was like my hero, right? This was like sort of my cycling idol that I had like called and said, how do you do this? How do you win this race? I really wanted to do what this guy had done. And it turns out he thinks that I cheated, that there was no way I could have caught him on that climb. So they do this thorough investigation of the race and they break down all the time splits between every single checkpoint and they do this stuff. And it looks really weird because from that baker to the next time station, I'm like 2 miles an hour faster than any solo in history had ever been. Everybody's like 13.4, 13.6, 13.7, 13.2, and mine's like 15.4. Looks really odd when like Tinker and Souza and all these pros are all right in the same realm. And all of a sudden, here's this one standout anomaly that's like 2 miles an hour faster than anybody had ever done it. It seems funky. So MD, he's like, "There's no way you did that. That's you must have grabbed a hold of the vehicle. You must have gotten a ride up there. Something happened." And I get that it looks funky, but the fact of the matter is it happened, and I understand how it happened, and it was entirely driven by me understanding that I'd finally won this race that I wanted so badly for years. I'd done hill repeats thousands of times, and I felt at that moment when we left there that I'd finally done it, and I blasted out of there like a freak. It was really interesting. So to have this guy that I had sort of idolized and always wanted to do call me a cheater, and we got to talk about it, and I'm like, "I'm sorry that you can't take losing, and I'm bummed for you that this, you're not able to accept this." And it was super cool. Kosman, the organizer of the race, ended up sending me this super long letter explaining that he did a thorough analysis and absolved me from any accusations, and it felt good for me. Yeah.
Good in the end, for sure. I'm glad it ended up that way. I think anyone that does something that's good or fast is always accused of cheating in some way, shape, or form. So, yeah,
Yeah.
kudos to you for hammering.
Thanks, man. Yeah, yeah.
On long events like that, what is your go to for food and drink?
It's changed so much over the years. I like a lot of real food. I do a lot of small roll ups and stuff, like cream cheese and tortilla and a piece of ham, little bite sized stuff. I've always liked like fig Newtons and cookies. I do a lot of standard like Coke and Gatorade. There was times where I did a lot of scratch and perpetuum and all that stuff early on in '05, '08, '09, some of those years. But more and more, it's gone to more natural foods. I like a lot of iced tea, actually, sweetened tea.
Okay.
I love that now. For the last 10 years or so, that's probably one of my primary fluids that I drink. Yeah.
Just iced tea, like sweetened iced tea?
Sweetened iced tea. Yeah. It doesn't have the same acidity as, Gatorade or any of those other drinks. And a
Huh.
lot of the mixes I don't like, but sweetened iced tea is awesome.
Well, I know I like sweetened iced tea. I do know what you mean, though. Some of those mixes, one in particular, my stomach just wasn't handling after a while for sure. So,
Yeah.
hmm, might have to look at sweetened iced tea.
Yeah.
Do you incorporate any strength training into your routines? Or did you ever?
I do. Yeah, quite a bit actually. So after my neck break, I ended up doing a lot of yoga in order to
Okay.
increase the flexibility of my neck. Again, through the rehab of that, I started doing a lot of hot yoga and Bikram yoga, and then it sort of evolved. The last 4 years, I've been doing a ton of these yoga sculpt classes where I'm doing, they're basically like cardio slash weight workouts, but I do it a lot.
Nice.
I'm coming up on like 1,000 classes in the last, I don't know, 3.5 years or something. So I'm doing that like 4 or 5 days a week. That's my strength work.
Gotcha. Do you spend any time training indoors or is everything, like for running or biking outdoors?
I've never run indoors. I do bike. We've got a spin bike in the basement. We got a TV set up down there. And I actually love watching cyclocross races and just spinning on our spin bike down there. I do a ton of that. It's just an excuse for me to be able to watch the cyclocross races. I go down there and sit on the spin bike and check it out. So, but it's never been like a training thing as much as it has been just a way for me to stay moving and watch the things I like.
Heck yeah. That's usually what I do when I try to go out there, but if I'm forced to be inside because I'm just tired of riding in 33 degrees and rain, then I'll catch up on, like you just said, some races or even a movie that I haven't seen that I want to see. So, Do you use anything, supplements, food, or devices to help you recover after hard workouts or any of those big events?
I use like essential amino acids, like a mix, a recovery drink. I do like a percussive massage gun that we've got. I use a foam roller and then also one of those rolling sticks as
Yep.
well. Yeah, and I say, I'm using that stuff pretty often, probably 4 or 5 days a week. I grab it when I'm watching TV and hanging out, Monday Night Football, that kind of thing.
Heck yeah. What do you think is the biggest waste of time when people are training?
Staring at Strava. I don't do Strava. It's funny. I know it's like the most common thing and everybody loves it. I don't know. I hear everybody talking about what everybody else did on Strava. And I think I've got a membership, or I actually signed in or whatever because I needed to get a route from a friend at one point. But to me, worrying about what everybody else is doing is the biggest waste of time. I've only got to focus on my body and what I think I should do for myself right now in order to get to my next goal. Whatever everybody else is doing is the biggest waste of time for me.
I like that advice, actually. When you focus on other people, you're not focusing on what you need to do. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Hmm. Maybe we'll all leave Strava. That
I doubt it.
would be funny. Oh. What do you feel is the most important thing to do after a hard workout or a race?
I mean, just take time off. I've never got a real plan as far as how many days I need to take off or when I should get back into training or anything like that. I really do just listen to my body. And when I feel like getting back into it, it's usually doing some lighter yoga stuff and then going for a jog with my wife and that kind of stuff. But it's never like some type of urgent strategic plan on when I need to start doing something again. It's really about listening to what's right for me and what's nagging my body and sort of
Yeah,
lightly easing back into the movement.
I think that's good. If there was one race you could do over, what would it be? And what would you have done differently?
It might be Paris-Brest Paris. So in 2011, I went over and did PBP. It's 1,200 kilometer. They say it's an event, but it's very much a road race, you know, 750 miles across France and back. And I had gotten to sort of mentor under some of the top two Americans who had done well in the 90s. They told me basically that they're going to cheat. They're like, look, here's the deal. The French guys are going to cheat.
What?
And here's how they're going to do it. In the second night, on the way back from Brest, the motorcycle drivers are going to lead the group off course. And the Frenchmen are going to know where that's going to happen, and they'll fall off the lead pack and go the right way, and the lead pack's going to go the wrong way. So these
Oof.
guys spelled it out for me. Exactly. Long story short, it happened exactly like they said it would in the second night. But I didn't see it. I just didn't see it when it happened. It's like we've got a pack of 30 guys and we've been going for who knows, at that point it was like 30 hours or something like that, just hammering in this massive pack that's, rotating double pace line at, 25, whatever. We're flying, going up and down these hills. And we get out to this intersection and there's no signs that say Paris. And I'm like, shit. I'm like slamming my handlebar. Like, shit, it happened. It happened. So I end up flipping the group around, and I'm the only American. There's Dutch and Spaniards, and there's all these different Italians. I'm with all this mixed group, and I'm like, Olé, we got to go. We're off route, and we end up like I had done 20K off in the wrong direction, so we had to do 20K back. So that's like 40K, 25 miles extra we had done.
Yeah.
Well, I just put down the hammer. I dropped the majority of that group I was with to get back on course. Got back to the aid station. My crew was there. They told me, they're like, look, lead pack went through, 3 French guys. There's a Belgian, this other guy. I'm like, shit. So we end up blasting out of there. And I told that group I was with, I'm like, I'm going, if you can come. And they all shook me off. And so I went solo off that group and ended up catching the Belgian guy that they had dropped, that the Frenchman dropped. And he and I worked together. Long story short, we ended up finishing 15 minutes behind them. And I
Oh,
ended up with, I know, and I did 25 miles extra. And it was like the fastest American rookie time in history. And I if you do some reverse math, I might have been able to break the record. It was an incredible ride. I felt incredible the entire time, and I didn't win. It sucks. So if I had one to do over again, I wish I had somehow done it differently or sat on those French guys' wheels so that I knew when they popped off or something like that in that second
Yeah.
night. But it didn't happen, even though I knew it was coming. So, yeah,
Yeah. Like tag one of their seats with a little orange dot. That's the French
exactly.
guy I need to follow.
Exactly.
That's a crazy story. Interesting.
Yeah. So, it's funny because some of the, best events or best placing things I didn't go well. Like that race, I felt better than I ever have on the bike. It was like 44 hours of me feeling like Superman. I felt unstoppable and I didn't win.
Yeah.
I think it's a good lesson. I've had other things like that, where just, you can't always win.
I guess not, right? When you get ready for a competition, is there anything that you do to get yourself motivated, or are you just motivated?
I don't really. No, there's no other than go to the bathroom. It's funny. I go to the bathroom about 6 times in the final hour of the race before a race. I just the nerves and everything. Like, I got to go pee again. 2 minutes till start. I got to go pee. Hold on.
Yep.
But that's no necessarily rituals or anything like that.
Any events on the calendar for this year now that we're in 23?
Yeah, I mean, strangely, I just signed up for PBP again. That
Oh,
the race I just told you about, the Paris-Brest Paris is happening again this year. I'm not positive I'm going to do it, but I was able to qualify. I did this thing called the LP 4000 last year, which was like a 1,400-kilometer ride through the Alps of northern Italy last year, which qualified me for signing up for PBP this year. So I'm signed up. I don't think I'm going to do it. We'll see. I'm more interested in like the LP I did last year. There's another one like that called the Transalp Rando, which I'm thinking of doing, which leaves out of Verona, Italy, 1,200 kilometers up through the Alps and through the Dolomites into Austria, down into Slovenia and back.
huh.
I love that style. It's not a race. It's these randoneering events called brevets, but they're just, you can go super far and super fast and through the Alps and see amazing things. And right now, that type of ride is far more appealing to me than trying to go fast at PBP again. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds
We'll
fun,
see.
actually.
Yeah, we're going to do that. And then I'm signed. My son decided we let each of our sons pick a trip that they wanted to do, like entirely inspired by them for their own reasons. And my oldest, the 15-year-old Caden, wants to go to Iceland. So this summer we're going to go to Iceland and we're going to do a trip around the entire perimeter. But then he and I are going to do this thing called the Lagavulin Trail, which is like supposed to be one of the top 10 trails on the planet. It's like 50 miles from point to point through all this incredible volcanic stuff. And
Huh.
so really looking forward to that. I've been doing a lot of research on it and watching videos and getting gear lists and kind of planning for that as well. So that'll be in July. Yeah, that's some of this stuff. My buddy Jim that I mentioned is doing Cocodona 250 this year. So I'll go down and crew and pace him. That was an event I did in 2022 and he paced me. So I'm going to go down and pace him, which is super cool. Outside of that, I don't know. My son and I will do some other 50Ks and some other stuff. We'll see.
Sounds fun. All sounds fun.
Yeah,
Did the Seattle Rainier Seattle ever happen?
it did. Yeah, the SRS. That was a cool event. So this was just sort of out of my buddy Jason's creativity. He had thought that it would be really cool to see if somebody could go from the Space Needle to the summit of Mount Rainier, which is like 14,004. It's a big glaciated mountain just south of here, to the summit and back and see how fast somebody could do that. So he thought that it could potentially be possible within 24 hours was his goal. And it's 100 miles each way to paradise. It's basically, we're talking about a 200-mile ride plus climbing this giant mountain. So we got some buddies together, we got a crew together, and we did it. We blasted away from the Space Needle, hauling ass on road bikes, flew all the way up to paradise, threw our packs on. We had a support crew that had left before we did and drove straight down to Mount Rainier to help carry our ropes and harnesses and ice axes and helmets get up to Camp Muir ahead of us so that they could melt ice to be able to make some water, have some food ready, have the ropes laid out because we needed to go super fast. Well, it turns out we caught them before they got to Camp Muir. So we blasted down there on the bikes, threw on tiny packs. We're jogging / hiking fast up to Camp Muir, and we caught our support crew,
Oh,
which was a bit of a
geez.
bummer because then we all got to Camp Muir at the same time. We had to, melt snow, make the food, lay out all the gear. So we lost a couple of hours there. We ended up getting out of there much later than we wanted, blasted up. We summited Mount Rainier, and then coming out of the crater, one of my buddies got bad altitude sickness, and he was probably the strongest climber on our team. And the altitude got him that time. He
Huh.
falls over, stands up, and his knees are wobbling. He can barely stand up. He collapses again. We're like, oh, this isn't good. So we end up putting him on the downside of the rope. And my buddy Jason and I just made sure. I mean, he would basically get a step or two before he'd fall over, and he'd stand up and make it a little further and fall over. And it took us hours to get from the summit back down to like even the cleaver on the mountain, which is about a little over 12,000 feet, where he finally started to feel better with the altitude thing. And so we ended up getting back down to Camp Muir hours after we had expected to. When we got within range of the radios, we had told our crews what was going on. We got down there, we were well off of our time. We knew we were no longer going to make the 24-hour thing. So we did get back from Camp Muir down to Paradise, hopped back on the road bikes, blasted another 100 miles from there back to the Space Needle. And I think we were like maybe 30 hours total or 31. I get all the times mixed up. We didn't hit the 24 hours we thought was possible, but 3 of our 4 legs were in time. So we know it's possible. Somebody's going to do it. We've got it sort of out there, and there's so many strong people now that somebody's going to see what we did and go, we can do that. And I look forward to watching them do it. It'll be cool.
Heck yeah. That's kind of a unique event. Bike, climb, bike, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's a must event in one of these endurance events for someone that's getting started that you think they should do?
I guess it depends if we're talking bikes or running. I think if running, I would say the Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier. It is a must. It is so spectacular. I mean, you go through just, you know, being low on the river, cross some bridge, big, beautiful glaciated rivers just gushing. And then all of a sudden you're climbing up and you go through these fields of blueberries and wild blueberries. And then you get up to the high alpine stuff and just absolutely gorgeous wildflowers, views of Mount Rainier, stunning. And then it's just back down the next side, the next side and up and down and up and down and up and down all the way around that mountain. It's ridiculously gorgeous and so, so cool. So I would say the Wonderland Trail on foot or the Grand Canyon, rim to rim to rim.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, super spectacular. That's a must. Biking wise, that stuff in Italy is so cool. That LP 4000 I just did, holy cow. I mean, we got to climb the Gavia, the Motorola, the Europa, the Nivole, the Finistra. That whole ride finished with the Stelvio. And the Stelvio, if you're a cyclist, is just a must. It's that iconic switchback climb up to this
Yeah.
pass that just seems surreal. When you see the pictures, you're like, that can't be a real thing. But it is, and it's so amazing, And that was our final climb on that 1,000-mile ride, was getting to climb the Stelvio. So I would say that's my must do on the bike.
Heck yeah. Appreciate those tips, especially, people getting started, not knowing where to go. Now you've got some choices.
I wouldn't start there though.
Right. Yeah, maybe not with
Yeah,
that
don't
bike
start
one,
there.
but maybe the Rainier
Yeah,
one, right?
yeah,
If
that's
you
a
were
100-mile run with no support, but
to...
don't start there either. But it's a good thing to work up to.
Right. If you were to give advice to younger athletes that look up to you, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say believe in yourself. Just you're capable of so much more than you can imagine. We really are. Young people, old people. I'm fortunate. I've got, I've seen my son do amazing things at 10, 11, 12, and I've got friends that are 70s, 80s. I've seen this guy at 90 doing incredible things. And so we're just, as humans, capable of so much more than we can imagine, and that's
Yeah.
the advice I would give to young people is just, you can do it. Get somebody in your life that can help steer you around how to do it and make it happen. Yeah. Don't wait.
Yeah. Believe in yourself and get someone in your corner.
Yeah.
Is there a book or a video or an athlete or a coach that you would recommend someone to follow that would maybe help, give information to younger people coming up or even someone getting started?
I don't know about that or necessarily the younger people. It's such a hard realm to find information for younger people, I think. As far as like who I'm following and that kind of stuff, I look up to this guy, Christoph Tuscher. I don't know, you probably never heard of that guy.
I think I have heard of him. Did he do the triathlon with the big log?
No.
No?
I don't think so. He's an older guy. He's actually out of Portland, but he does all these adventure runs that are just mind blowing to me. And he puts together the coolest YouTube videos. I can send you a couple of links, but super funny guy, but he's doing just amazing stuff every single year. And I love the fact that I think it was last year, he said that 50% of the events he started, he failed at,
Oh.
And it's just that he's picking some super, super ambitious routes that are mostly like off trail or crazy stuff in the Arctic or crazy stuff on trails that were a thing 100 years ago that are no longer there, but he's just out there doing it. I'm super inspired by it, and I love watching his content and following his events. So I would say follow Christoph Tuscher.
Christoph Tuscher. Follow him on YouTube, you said, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we sign off?
I don't think so, man. I appreciate you pushing good content out there and inspiring people and, collecting stories. It's good work, man.
Thanks. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you on social?
Yeah, I do Instagram and Facebook, Chris Ragsdale. I think on Instagram it's Ragsdale Chris. I do actually have a website back when I had all my ultra cycling stuff. It was ragsdaleridesagain.com, where I think there's an old video of Ram on there and some stuff, but I haven't updated that in probably since 2013, I think.
All right.
10 years ago.
Nice. All right. Well, find him on Instagram and Facebook and connect with him there. Chris, this has been a fun conversation, learning about your love for the endurance events. Treasure that relationship that you have with your son. I appreciate you making the time today to come on and share your story.
Cool. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. And to all the listeners, gratitude. You have just listened to Unpacking the Athlete.